As Gaza still counts its dead, Israel stands accused of committing war crimes during its 22-day war on the Strip. Can Israel be held accountable, and who'd be able to do it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Garda. Israel has begun forming a defense team in case war crimes charges are brought against its military. Human rights groups are claiming that Israel acted illegally during its 22-day campaign in the Gaza Strip. The International Criminal Court has been discussing the possibility of war crimes tribunals, and the UN are calling for a full investigation into Israel's treatment of civilians, as Bethan Howe reports.
Burns victims at the main hospital in Khan Yunis in Gaza. Doctors here say these war-related injuries have them questioning what weapons were used during Israel's 3-week offensive.
I'm sure it is a chemical weapons, and the problem is that, okay, this is the transient effect, the temporary effect is end out. But what about the long-term effect?
Israel has been accused of using illegal weapons, including white phosphorus. It's legal under international law to release the substance into the air to cover troop movements. But the allegation is that Israel used it as a weapon, indiscriminately targeting civilians.
My impression is that no one's denying that white phosphorus was used. The question is, how was it used, what kind of shells were they, and was it used in appropriate ways?
Israel has also been criticised by human rights organisations for using excessive force in densely populated areas. In one incident, it's alleged Israeli troops herded the members of an extended family into a building. They then repeatedly shelled it. The Red Cross have said that it was then 4 days before the emergency services were allowed to access the survivors, many of them children, who were found sat next to the bodies of their dead relatives. The Fourth Geneva Convention that Israel is signed up to stipulates that a war crime is murder or ill treatment of civilians, and destruction and devastation not justified by military necessity. The UN Council on Human Rights has voted for a resolution condemning Israel's offensive.
We are deeply concerned about attacks that may have caused indiscriminate or disproportionate loss of civilian life in violations of the rules of war. Most notably, the January 6 attack near a UN school housing displaced persons, which killed a reported 40 civilians.
Israel has suggested that Hamas was using civilians as human shields, which is why the number killed was so high. Israel denies any wrongdoing and has already begun forming a defence team in the event of war crimes charges being brought. A Palestinian minister has met with the International Criminal Court's prosecutor to discuss the allegations. In the hospitals of Gaza, doctors continue to deal with wounds they've never seen before. Whether their patients are war crimes victims or unfortunate casualties, to them is just academic. Bethan Howe for Inside Story.
Well, joining us now are our guest in Jerusalem, Robbie Sable. He's a former legal advisor to the Israeli Foreign Ministry and a lecturer of international law at the Hebrew University. And in Nablus, Abdusattar Qasim. He's a professor of political science at Nablus Najah University. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Robbie Sable, let's start off talking about white phosphorus. We know it was used. There's a chorus of voices saying it was used over civilian areas. It's a bit indefensible from your part, isn't it?
White phosphorus is a legal weapon when it's used for marking and for smokescreen. This is what the Israeli army used it for. And, by the way, I would like to quote here Mr. Peter Herby, who is in charge of arms and mines for the International Committee of the Red Cross. In an interview with the AP News Service, he said, and I'm reading, that it was in fact used to create smoke or illuminate a target, and we have no evidence to suggest it being used in any other way. That is from the official representative of the International Committee of the Red Cross.
All right, let me throw a quote back at you then. British weapons expert Chris Cobb-Smith, sent to Gaza by Amnesty International, said, I quote, "We saw streets and alleyways littered with evidence of the use of white phosphorus, including still burning wedges and the remnants of the shells and canisters fired by the Israeli army. I repeat, streets and alleyways littered with evidence of the use of white phosphorus. We've also got our own pics we've got Human Rights Watch, United Nations Relief and Works Agency as well, saying it was fired over a civilian area. That seems to be pretty strong evidence.
It's strong evidence that white phosphorus was used. Israel has not denied it. The fighting was over populated areas simply for the reason that Hamas put their rockets in populated areas. However, it was not directed at civilians. Now, of course, if you're firing smoke shells, they're going to land on the ground, and by the way, they're dangerous to handle, as by the way is any flare that is still burning, but they were not aimed at civilian casualties, at civilian personnel.
How can you guarantee that nothing you fire will hit a civilian, given that this was the most and is the most densely populated area in the world? Israel knew that civilians would be in the areas it targeted. And doesn't a war crime also include the fact that you know civilians will die no matter who you're targeting?
This raises a very fundamental question. How do you fight an enemy that places its rockets in a civilian population? You have two choices. One of them is not to return fire. But bear in mind, we had literally thousands of rockets aimed at our civilian towns and villages. Rockets, by the way, which included shrapnel. So the possibility of not returning fire did not exist. The other is to try and minimize civilian casualties. This is what we did. We did it by a number of methods. One of them is dropping leaflets, hundreds of thousands of leaflets over the area saying you're about to be bombed. We did this in order to let the civilian population free, knowing, by the way, that it gave them a military advantage. There was no surprise. The other we did, I think, is an innovation of connecting computers to their phones. So the population of an area all got simultaneous phone warnings, we are about to reply to fire. The other possibility of simply not returning fire is not something that a country can stand by. By the way, we have to protect Palestinian civilians. We also have to protect our own civilians.
Abdul Sattar Qasim, Mr. Sable said that they dropped leaflets on the people of Gaza warning them, so it was fine, whatever happened afterwards.
Well, actually, the Israelis were killing on purpose civilians. And it's not true that Israel targeted some military targets and as a side effect, they killed civilians. On the contrary, they were killing civilians on purpose. And we have testimonies from Palestinian children who eyewitnessed the killing of the members of their family, including their young brothers and sisters. So the Israelis actually were using this mass killing and these massacres against the civilians so as to put so much pressure on the political and military leaderships in Gaza, so they will just end the war or just surrender or pull out or make certain promises desirable to the Israeli leadership. So the Israelis have been committing actually war crimes. They have been doing so many illegitimate things. And we know from the history of Israel, actually, they don't abide with the international law, and they usually throw the international law behind their backs because they are backed by international powers, particularly from the United States. And we know from the international relations, from history, that law is not actually made to punish the strong nations or the strong people. It's only made to punish the weak people.
Okay,
this is true in the 20th
sorry to interrupt you. I just want to bring in one of the points. Sorry to interrupt you. I want to bring in one of the points that Mr. Sable made. He said that Hamas was firing these indiscriminate rockets at southern Israel, which led to Israel conducting this offensive on Gaza. Would you agree that Hamas's indiscriminate firing of the rockets is also, if you want to term it, a war crime?
But before we talk about that, we should talk
I want
about
to talk about that.
Israel is
could you
an
answer the
occupying
question?
country. Because that's the reason. You know, that's the reason why Hamas is firing those missiles, those rockets, because they are under occupation. They are under siege. Now the Israelis have been killing Palestinian civilians for 40 years or 60 years or even before the creation of Israel. The Zionist movement killed and made so many massacres against the Palestinians. So the Palestinian organizations say why they kill our civilians. If they do so, we cannot hit them directly on their military posts, so we will try to hit them in general, because we don't have those precise missiles in Gaza that pinpoint the target. So those are primitive missiles. They are not sophisticated. They are not American missiles. So they hit the general population centers in Israel. Now, this is completely different from what Israel does. Israel has the sophisticated weapons supplied by the United States. They can pinpoint exactly and precisely the targets. They can do much better than that if they want to fight a clean war. But that's anyhow the behavior of the Israelis. And that was true even in southern Lebanon. They made the massacres, they destroyed the houses in southern Lebanon, and they made so many massacres against the Palestinians. That is an Israeli policy. Kill civilians so as to pressure the political and the military leaderships.
Robbie Sable, international law also talks about the concept of proportionality. 1,314 Palestinian deaths to 13 Israeli deaths. That's 100 to 1. Surely that's a war crime.
It's not, but I'd like to make a comment, by the way, about these primitive weapons. The Hamas have been firing, indeed, homemade small Qassam rockets. They've also been firing Iranian-made, long-range, heavy missiles equipped with lots and lots of tiny metal balls. These aimed at civilian towns and villages. This was aimed deliberately at killing. The law of proportionality says that you must aim at military targets, even if casualties, there'll be civilian casualties, you must make an effort to minimize it. In other words, there must be a proportion between the military targets and the civilian casualties. Now, if you look at, we've had 22 days of very fierce fighting, including aerial bombardments, aimed at hundreds, literally hundreds, of Hamas rocket launching sites, ammunition dumps, manufacturing. The number of civilian casualties is not disproportionate to that sort of attack.
1,314 Palestinians killed, over a third children. And you're saying Israel took the greatest care in minimizing civilian deaths? Who are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. I know of no army that has taken greater steps to prevent in urban fighting. Now try and look back. You look back at history where an army's had to fight an enemy in a civilian town, in an urban fighting, where there's been less casualties than Israel inflicted. We did this by unprecedented steps of warning the civilian population of every single attack. And they deliberately place their rockets. I don't think they even deny it, next to civilian targets, knowing that there will be civilian casualties, not caring not only about our civilian casualties, not caring about their own civilian casualties, because this, of course, makes good PR. It's a horrible picture to see children wounded.
Well, talking about PR,
if they're Palestinian or Israeli.
Talking about PR, yes, there could be a counter-argument to say that the only reason those leaflets were dropped was so that if afterwards, when everybody does a post-mortem of it, and if this does go into an international court, Israel can say, oh, we did all we could, we dropped leaflets before we bombed.
We didn't only drop leaflets. We dropped leaflets before we bombed. We phoned the people, tell them, leave the houses, we're going to attack the rockets. No army has ever done this before. By the way, we have legal advisors in combat units trying to make sure that the targets won't cause disproportionate civilian attacks. We have, on the other side, an enemy that has deliberately calculated, aimed its thing at civilians, hoping to cause civilian casualties. And there's a deafening silence from the world about this, with sort of understanding, well, you've got to understand them. Frankly, we don't understand them. They're throwing rockets at our towns. I have family in Ashkelon who are hiding in shelters. We don't understand they're firing rockets at our civilians.
OK, gentlemen, it's time for a short break. When we come back, we'll talk more about war crimes Israel has been accused of in Gaza and war crimes it's been accused of ever since its creation. Stay with Inside Story.